Today we are in Huntsville, Alabama, and we're going to learn about Huntsville real estate with my great friend, Zack Childress. Stay tuned. Zack, welcome. Good to see you.
Well, man, I'm happy to be here.
I haven't been to Huntsville in a long time, so thank you for kind of showing me around. And
Yeah.
I love what you got going on with the McRIA, the Madison County RIA. Just tell me about it. Tell me what's new with the RIA. The last time I was here was many years ago. You were in a completely different facility. So tell me what's new with the RIA.
We rented a facility back then, and so now we've bought a building, and the whole purpose of the building was to serve the community and grow the club and, be in a position to where we didn't have to rely on a hotel or an event space, but just be free to hold whatever event we wanted, whenever we wanted it, and really just have free events because we didn't have to pay for a building or an event space or a hotel anymore. And so that really evolved us over the last couple of years, where we started doing a lot more stuff, a lot like beginner classes, coffee meetings, workshops, just so many extra things for our community, and blessings that, the building was for sale and we bought it.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. So give me an idea of what's the structure of the RIA? Like, how can somebody get involved? I know there's lots of different marketing that you put out there for ways for people to find out about you, but what happens at a meeting? I come to a monthly meeting, and then what do you guys talk about? What kind of how is it all set up, and how do we get involved?
Well, we're an association, so we're an education club to the core. That is what we are. So we're not like a potluck meetup or a coffee meetup. Like, we're a full-rounded investment association or a local investor club, but we specifically target on the escalation of the education for an investor. And so, for example, like, we hold a monthly meeting every single month. It's free. There's nothing, they don't have to pay to come. And each month is a different topic. And so it's kind of a high level overview of what real estate involves. What is this specific topic? What's 1031 exchanges? What's the BRRRR method? What's flipping? What's wholesaling? What's lead acquisition? So those are mainly around our monthly meetings. And we have a lot of local speakers. We don't really bring in national speakers. Just if they're local and they specialize locally in a specific thing, we have them come and talk. So that's our monthly. And then we have a breakout where a couple of times a month we do coffee meetings, and those are in the morning. And those are really those aren't lecture style. It's just we hang out in the lounge area and everybody just networks and has a good time and talks about real estate. And I pull up a chair and let them pick my brain for, 40 minutes or so. And, and that's always interesting, those questions that come out. But it gives them an environment to meet like-minded people, but also get a lot of their answers, right? Because, someone who runs a club like yourself, it's, they're trying to catch you before you go on stage or when you're coming off of the stage. And so
you just don't have the time.
You don't.
And it really, that kind of upsets me because things will kind of get back to me where you were kind of this way to this person, or you didn't really give this person the time. And it's very difficult on the day you're doing it to try to have a meaningful conversation.
They want to all catch you, right? And so, and I got it too early on. It was, hey, you're not accessible. That was the word I kept hearing. And I said, okay, well, how do I make myself accessible? And it was through the coffee meetings or the property walks, where I could bring a group in and answer all their questions at once. And it's great because, I've been doing this 23 years, you know what I mean? And so we attract a lot of new people, and they all have real questions, and you want to help them. And that's the whole reason we do what we do. But that's kind of like our base. Like, here's everything we do. And then we roll out free beginner classes that we do to help people get a real clear idea of what real estate investing is going to take and what are the principles behind it and how do they make money in it and what is creative real estate, right? And how is that such a lucrative thing if they focus and they get in and they educate themselves. And so that's kind of the ladder. And then obviously you'll get some that'll say, okay, I want to go deeper into this. I want to learn about buying rentals. I want to learn about flipping properties. And so twice a year we hold a 3-day boot camp. Every 6 months, that's all we do. And each one's different. And so, people will come to that to immerse themselves in 3 days of learning and educating and really dialing in a true framework and blueprint for that specific thing. And so it's been a wonderful thing, honestly. I mean, I've had this club now for 15, almost 16 years. And I'd really say, and you know the story, it was probably 2019 2020 really when I just said, I'm going to just focus on this club. Because I used to do national. I went around, spoke all over the country and 48 of all the states. And I just stopped all that in 2019. And I only focused here and only wanted to give back here. And that's why this club has grown to what it has grown to. I mean, just in our group alone on Facebook, we're pushing almost 6,000 people. Yeah. And, our meetup is like pushing 3,000. And so, that's been a blessing. And just seeing all the success stories, honestly. I mean, that is, at the end of the day, could I walk away from the club? I could, but golly, it pulls me back, man. Like, I just had a young kid. He's 26 years old. He just made over 100,000 his first year out, coming to the club and learning and getting involved. And so that's a big reason why it's like, let me go help a couple more people.
It's such a motivator and you've been doing it, you just said 23 years. You've been doing this for a long time. You see someone else go out and have that kind of success. It really does kind of like do something inside of you. Like, you almost get more fired up than they do.
I do. I'm like, man, you should be excited. You're like, come on, man. Like, you're 26 years old, and you just did 6 figures your first year out, But more importantly, I think what it does is what that sign says behind your head, which is success stories. It shares a story to others that have fear or doubt or lack of clarity that it does work. And it's like, no, it does work, but you have to work it and you have to put the time in to educate yourself.
Yeah. And I just think you've done a tremendous job with that. I mean, I think back, you're talking about 23 years you've been in. I've only been in it for 13 years. So you've got a full decade on me, but just the time that I've been in it and I've seen you operate, obviously, we're being, kind of as close as we are, about an hour and a half away, where when I first got to kind of know who you were, become aware of you, it's like, well, Zack he's in Huntsville, but he kind of has his little club in Huntsville, but he's speaking everywhere. He's really more of a national type of figure. And that's when I first got to know you. But over these past 5 or 6 years, to see what you've done and just invest, I'm not even talking about your money, but just invest your time into the Huntsville community. I always kind of had the question, well, is Huntsville even big enough to have a club like that? And now we just see like this massive explosion of what's going on in Huntsville. And I'm going to try to stay completely out of the politics range, completely. But I do want to ask you, you've been in Huntsville for a long period of time. Just let's just take the last 10 years. Oh, wow. What kind of growth have you seen in this city?
So Huntsville is an absolute amazing melting pot. Look, we can say we don't want to talk about politics, but the politicians are part of the reason of that melting pot, explosion, expansion, growth, because they have a huge part on what they elect or what they approve or what they push through, all these things. And I will just say this, that Huntsville over the last 10 years, and I've been here 16 of those years, in the last 10 years, the movement for progressiveness here is one of the biggest reasons I think Huntsville has been exposed everywhere. Magazines, news, articles, you name it, it's been everywhere because we have made such a push to be progressive here and be a melting
Can you
pot.
define that? What do you mean by? Because I mean, I think a lot of people might have their own definitions of what being progressive means. What do you mean by that?
Being progressive meaning willing to grow, willing to expand, willing not to keep a closed-minded mindset on things. You know what I mean? Willing to say, hey, you know what? Let's have a 10-year vision. Let's be like Nashville. Let's build a speed train in here. Let's add bypasses. Let's give credits to businesses that want to build here. Let's fight to bring, like the FBI relocation here. Let's fight for NASA and SpaceX. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they are making hard pushes to not, in the front end, maybe it wouldn't be a big win because they're bidding for them, but they see the 10-year plan. You know what I mean? Like, they see, like, if we can get it here, that's going to create growth, it's going to create taxes, it's going to create expansion. And I think that's the biggest part. Now, don't get me wrong, we have areas where they've overdone that, like our apartment new constructions here. Like, it's just overbuilt right now. But but my point is being progressive, as in, I believe that's the reason we've grown so fast. And if you take a little bit of a look and a study, our average income in a family here is about 20% less than what it is in San Diego, California. And that's because of the bioengineers here, the engineers here, the missile defense here, the government here, the FBI here, all of that. And that's high paying jobs. That's what happened to our real estate market. Mm-hmm. Where when I was buying houses, I was buying little houses here, and I still own a ton of them, like for $20,000.
Right.
And now they're selling for $250, right, $270.
Right. Trust me, there's parts of Birmingham that are like that too. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, because not really, I know about that much about Huntsville, right? When you compare it to what I know about Greater Birmingham. When people say Huntsville, there's a lot of different kind of areas around here. Mm-hmm. You've got Madison, which is kind of, when someone says Huntsville, they might even mean Madison.
I do it. I live in Madison and I say Huntsville.
Right. So can you kind of take me through Huntsville, the city of Huntsville, Madison, and then you've got Decatur, and you help me, because there's other towns, Athens, there's other towns around the periphery that I think a lot of people consider to be kind of greater. Huntsville, can you call it that way?
We call it the three counties. And so the three counties are Madison County, Limestone County, and Morgan County. And those three counties is kind of, I know it's not classified as our metro, but it might as well be our metro.
I think it's going to be eventually.
Yeah, because people who live in Limestone County, which is the heart of Athens, and Morgan County, which is the heart of Decatur, they all commute here in Huntsville and work, or Decatur commutes even into Birmingham and works. And so it's kind of like a river city over there. But when you look at Madison County itself, which is the largest of the three, it encompasses so much. You've got Huntsville, you've got South Huntsville, you've got North Huntsville, you've got, over the mountain, East Huntsville, West Huntsville, which then borders Madison. And then you go north into Hazel Green, Meridianville. You've got, Harvest up in there, and then you've got Owens Cross. I mean, there's so much expansion that's gone on here, with all those little cities were just farmlands. And now you drive out there and it's just fields and fields of houses now, trying to keep up with the population growth here, which they've done a great job. Because I used to live in California. I was born in Alabama, moved to California and came back. In California, they did the same thing. You take a part like South Sacramento, Elk Grove. They went in and built thousands of houses. But the problem was they never built any infrastructure. So you would have to drive 20 minutes just to get out of your neighborhood to get to a grocery store. Where here, they've not done that. They've gone in and built infrastructure first, and then started allowing the land to be acquired to build, subdivisions, which I think is one of the greatest strategies you could do, because that influences the growth of the city through the taxes, right? That is what feeds the city, is that infrastructure. Yeah, the property owners pay taxes, but the businesses pay taxes, and that increases that well-being of the city, which they've done a great job with.
And I also feel like that Huntsville and Madison, maybe in particular, it's starting to, you mentioned going north. What about going a little bit south?
It's hard to go south.
Why is that?
because we have the military base and then we have the Tennessee River.
When I say south, I'm talking about south on 65 though.
Oh, you mean going down past Coleman and Hartselle?
Not even that far down. I'm not even as far down as Coleman. Like start coming south on 65.
You hit Decatur.
Okay.
And then after Decatur, it's Coleman, and then it's Hartselle.
Yeah.
And Coleman is trying. Let's be clear. Coleman is trying it, and they're making some progressive moves. But Hartselle has dominated them.
Right. But I guess what I'm trying to ask is the line from Coleman to Birmingham. The line is starting to get gray.
Yeah.
It's starting to, as far as like, it's almost becoming like this one gigantic metro. And I feel like that's kind of happening too. They're trying to spread Huntsville kind of south, Decatur, and then a little bit further. The lines are eventually, in the next 10 years, don't you think it's going to be pretty gray there?
I don't. And here, just from my knowledge of this area, when you come down 65 and Decatur's on the west side of 65, all that progressive is going southwest. Hartselle, around in that area, that's where all that push is going because the school systems are great. Houses are still affordable. You can get land with it. When you go east of 65, just south of the Tennessee River, it's still tough there. You got like Priceville, Summerville, you got some areas down there. And they just haven't really started to let going of enough land there. There's no real infrastructure built. There's some, don't get me wrong. You still got your Piggly Wigglies out there and stuff, but no, they haven't come to the point to being a little bit more progressive. They haven't pushed, to say, hey, let's widen the infrastructure. Let's bring in businesses and then let's allow for, subdivisions to be built. They just haven't done that yet. Where when you go down South 231, you get over the Tennessee River and you push into like Arab's absolutely doing that right now. I've got so many students killing it in Arab right now. Just gobbling up real estate and fixing them and flipping them because it's still such an old community there. Mm-hmm. And they're making a huge push down 69, which takes you into Gunnersville. The city has gone in there and started offering a lot of different incentives for businesses to come in. So that's getting pushed out a lot down 69 there too. So.
Gotcha. So for an investor, first of all, you mentioned the apartments. You say there's something like they're kind of overdoing it. Kind of talk about, because obviously Huntsville's experienced a ton of population growth. Yeah. And they're having to keep up with housing because housing is so far lagging behind the population growth. But you're saying they're overbuilding apartments. What do you feel like they should be doing? That's
there's a bill trying to get passed right now. And don't quote me on this. I may not have all the numbers exact, but one of the vice presidents I work with at a bank sent me this report. And they know there's an overbuild of apartments. And these apartments are being built into one bedroom's $1,200 a month. You know what I mean? And they know that that's not catering to the need of our population, which is affordable housing. Where the affordable housing used to be in North Huntsville, well, now those houses are not affordable anymore because where you could rent for $800, now they're charging $1,700. And so... And there's something like, and don't quote me on this, but there's something like 4,000 permits that have been approved for apartments, and there's like another 6,000 waiting to be approved. And so that's a problem. That's a problem when you have that overpriced commodity that still doesn't cater to the biggest need, which is affordable housing. And so the bill that I saw that they're looking to try to get passed is that I think it's somewhere around 15 or 20% they're going to make developers cater to. So if you're going to go build an apartment complex, new, 20% of all the units in there have to meet the standard of affordable housing rents. And they're trying to push it the same on builders. Hey, if you're going to go build a new subdivision for 100 houses, 20% of that subdivision has to be built for catering to affordable housing. And the study showed where, my first pushback is well, if it's a $400,000 neighborhood and now you got to sell it, at a $200,000 price point, won't that alter, the community? Well, how is that going to affect the community and values and upkeep? But they showed a study that they pulled from Nashville. So Nashville did this. And they said that it actually increased value and it increased home ownership and it increased, the market as a whole. And so So I'm just waiting, kind of seeing how that unfolds, because I think that is going to push a lot of builders kind of like, do I really want to do this? Can I build, 20% at a price point that's affordable? But if it does, I think it will absolutely put a huge dent in the need for affordable housing here. And that's our biggest thing. It's not housing. We got more houses here than, look, our inventory has skyrocketed. We went from 1.8 months of inventory to where we're pushing 3.8 right now. You know what I mean? So it's not that we don't have the inventory, it's just it's all overpriced. Mm-hmm. And so I think our biggest issue right now is, yes, we boomed, we accelerated, prices went up, everybody made money, everything was happy. But there's this whole segment of affordable housing group out there that's like, hey, I can't even afford the rent. I can't even afford to buy a house. And that's what I think they're trying to fix right now. Mm-hmm. And that's not going to get fixed overnight.
Where do you think the opportunity is for someone who might have money that's coming in either from out of state or outside of the actual city? Like, where's the opportunity for me to come in, maybe buy a house and rent it out, maybe apartment syndications, whatever it may be? Where's the opportunity for an investor?
Well, Brian, that's a loaded question, because that's going to depend on a lot of questions on that investor. What's their risk tolerance? What are they trying to avoid or gain? Do they need cash flow? Or are they just looking for,
let's just look at a cash flow standpoint. I'm looking to park some money for cash flow.
And here's what I'm going to say to that question. All of it is good, depending on your knowledge base and your risk tolerance. If you're like, hey, I got money, but I just want to buy in Huntsville because I want to own there for the next 10 to 20 years, then you should be buying houses between $200,000 to $300,000, putting 25% down, securing a good little loan on it, and then put a renter in it, and then let it ride. Because that $200,000 house will be worth $350,000 in 10, 20 years. You know what I mean? And if you put it on a 15 or 20 year amortized mortgage, 15, 20 years, it'll be paid off, and now you'll have a B-class asset with a solid renter, and you won't have to worry about all the headaches and the issues. If you're the investor that's like, look, I don't have that kind of time, but I need cash flow, then you need to move outside of Huntsville. You need to move into Arab, Hartselle, Decatur, Athens. You need to move into some of the Hazel Green, some of the outer skirts of the markets where you can still get an affordable, how I call affordable, under $200,000.
So tell me about those areas. So if I'm really specifically looking at maybe something turnkey.
Yeah, well, that's not going to be in those areas, because the reason we go into those outer rings, tier 2, tier 3 rings, is because they're older, they need more work, and we get better prices on them. So we can go in and buy them for $80, put $30 into them, rent them for $1,500 a month, right? So we get that greater than 1 point or that 1% rule, but it requires us to dig up a good deal and then put the work into it. So it's not buying it turnkey. If someone's like, look, I just want turnkey, I would go to a property management company and say, hey, I'm looking to buy 10 houses, turnkey, I don't want to deal with anything. And there's property management companies in our market that have those or can do that and then give them to you. That to me sounds like just a hands-off investor, just wants to park money. And if that's the case and that they want to live their life on the beach somewhere, then they don't need to go do what I do.
Right. No, I understand.
Yeah.
No, I understand that.
They need to go find a management company that offers that can manage it, handle it, get it turnkey, and then start sending them checks.
But I guess what I'm asking is the greater Huntsville area a good option?
100%.
I've heard Huntsville's growing. I heard it's exploding. But I want to put money here.
Huntsville is one of the hardest markets right now to find a good deal. There's everybody and their brother and their hairstylist is trying to buy houses here, right? But if you want to, so there's a couple of things you got to look at. Yeah, Huntsville is the hot word, but as investors, what we're trying to identify is how do I get the best deal now and long term? And the way we do that is we have to understand a very simple concept, which is migration of population. That is the greatest gift that you'll ever be presented with when it comes to holding real estate. Is figuring out how to get in front of that migration and then allow the migration to accelerate your equity, right?
So you feel like it's too late for
in
that
Huntsville.
In Huntsville.
Yes, in Huntsville, but not in the tier 2, tier 3 markets. And I mean tier 2, tier 3, like Huntsville, Tier 2 market would be like Hazel Green, Meridianville, start getting into some of like East Limestone, Athens, East Athens, some parts of Decatur, those. You get into Tier 3, it opens up a whole nother world. Like that's when you're getting into like Hartselle, Florence, you're getting into Pulaski, Tennessee, you're getting over the mountain out there, you're getting into Arab, you're getting into parts of Coleman. Those markets still have room for migration and growth. And that's where I focus on, is in those outer rings, because I'm a long-term strategy guy. I don't mind buying it and making $300 a month now or $400 a month now on it net, but I know in 10 years my equity is going to go up 100 grand. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at. And I think for any investor that's in that world, that's what they're going to look at too, because it's not like you don't need to live or survive on the cash flow now. You want cash flow because cash flow is part of your balance, but you want the net worth to grow as well. And that's what those markets do for you.
This is why I love talking to you, because there's a lot of kind of educators out there that are good educators, and they know real estate. They've done real estate. You're all that, plus you're doing real estate at kind of high volume. Not just you, and you mentioned to me earlier before we even started recording, you're doing deals with your students too.
Oh yeah, all the time.
So what kind of deals, like if you bring somebody comes in your program, you're going to do some deals with, what kind of deals are y'all doing? Are you doing mostly
So it's
flips?
primary flips.
Okay.
Because here, and there's a reason behind that, because most of the people that need help getting started in real estate, it's very few. Only about 20% of the people that hire me to help them are solely focused on buying apartments or cash flow or repositioning their portfolio. You know what I mean? It's a small fraction.
It's the people that want to kind of get started and get going.
It's 80% of them are like, hey, I want to get started. And so we know that there's a primary concept to getting started. And that is, if you say, I want to get started and buy rentals, you're going to run out of money. You're just absolutely going to run out of money. Until the BRRRR, and look, I love BRRRR. I'm a big fan of BRRRR, but it's not like it used to be, right? Like we've got to dig harder to find BRRRRs that we can buy, renovate, refinance, repeat, right? Or rent, repeat. We got to dig harder for that, so there's not as many of them available to where we can try to get our money back. But right now, I'm always looking at two faults with everybody that I work with. Number one is what money are you able to deploy? I got very little. Okay, then we need to build a strategy to create more, which is flipping, right? What's the end goal? I want cash flow. Okay, so then we need to build a secondary tier, which is as we go out and we start making money flipping, now we have capital that we can leave into some rental properties, and we can start building your rental property as we're out here turning 3, 4, 5 rehabs a year. And that's why I focus on those two principles when someone's getting started, is like we've got to do earned income at the same time as passive income. Now, you can't just jump into passive income if you don't have any money. Not saying you can't, you can, but you got to go raise private money and other avenues. But, my focus has always been, how do I get money in their pocket as fast as possible? And I know that's through rehabbing or wholesaling. I know that. Even though I'm not as big of a fan of teaching wholesaling as I used to, I don't do one-on-one wholesaling anymore. I'll do a group class every once in a while. But I've learned over the years, over 2 decades, that when someone comes to this club and I say, hey, what strategy are you starting out with? Wholesaling. And I'm like, why? Well, I want to build money. Why? So I can go do a rehab. So you want to build money to do a rehab by wholesaling. So what you're really telling me is that
You want to rehab.
You want to rehab, and you just haven't learned how to get access to the money yet. They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well then why don't we focus on how to get access to the money so you can rehab?
Yeah. So, but all that, everything you just said, it all starts. You gotta find a deal first, right?
Absolutely.
Anything even if they were going to wholesale or you are going to flip, even if you're going to hold a property, you got to have a deal.
You got to have a deal.
So I'm surely you're teaching them how to find a deal.
So I teach on what's called 4 pillars to investing. That is my entire core. That is my theology. That is what I stand for. And there's 4 pillars to this, or 4 principles, however you want to look at it. And I tell everybody, look, if we're going to work together, there's 3 key pillars that we're going to do before we start running out wide open. Number 1 is foundation. We're going to build your foundation. And inside foundation includes how to build your team, where all the money comes from, how to get access to the money, what's the different resources, why is some money good for this, some money good for that, and how do we build that that connection to all these different types of funders, right? It's not just a bank. It's not just an asset lender. There's more funders that help us do 100% deals with someone else's money. Then we go into market selection and then systems and tools. And so it's like, okay, now we know our market. Now we know our team. Now we know where the money's coming from. And we have the tools to go out and get this done. Boom, foundation is done. Then we move into pillar 2, which is understanding how to go out and actually do what you're saying. We call it our lead intake process. And we say, okay, now we're going to teach you about lead intake. And so lead intake is marketing, where all the leads come from, free and paid, how we understand them, what are the KPIs behind them, communication, research, analyze, negotiate, and convert. So that we never get out of, that we stay in forever. And then pillar 3 is obviously contract to closing. Like, how do we take a contract and get real specific on how it gets closed? Because here's why. Every strategy has a different principle behind how it closes. Is it a creative financing? Is it a wrap? Is it a sub 2? Is it a contract for deed? Is it a wholesale lease? You know what I mean? They all have different principles. And so it's getting clear on that. And then pillar 4 is just teaching them how to be a transactional engineer. And that really comes from just the years of me being in this. And the reason that I'm able to do as many deals as I do is because I don't look at every deal from one lens. I'm like, okay, well, they can't sell it cheap enough for me to rehab it, but what else can I do with it? And so I'm teaching them critical thinking around the ideas of the different principles of how deals are structured and what they need to learn to be able to structure deals that way. And so that's our core. That's the theology that we teach off of.
Oh, I love it. What are some of the big mistakes you see people making when they first get started?
Oh my gosh. Not listening. Not listening. We call them ask holes.
Okay.
Do you know what that is?
Ask hole. Yeah, I do know what it is.
An ask hole.
Absolutely, I know what it is.
They ask you 1,000 questions about a deal, and you say, "Don't buy that deal." 2 months later, they come back and they're like, "Man, I'm going to lose my." I'm like, "I told you not to buy that deal."
Well, it's the person that gets quiet. You don't hear from them for a couple months, and you have to kind of reach out to them. What happened? And you learn that they didn't want to tell you that they bought the deal. Right. You told them not to.
1,000%, because they feel shame and guilt from it.
Because they realize it wasn't the right thing.
They should have listened. I'm just saying, like, sometimes what someone with experience that I bring into their world, there's a reason why I have that experience. And it's because of all the failures and the knockdowns and I wish I wouldn't have done those moments, right? That I get to share amongst the students. And I'm like, look, your eyes are this big because you want it to be something. Mm-hmm. But logically, and the numbers are saying this, like, look at the logical aspect of this and it won't work. That's one. Also, I do find a lot of like just YouTube University students that, spend a lot of time on YouTube and then they go out and try to do deals and then they fall flat on their face. And look, I love YouTube. I absolutely love YouTube. I think it has opened a world for people to have access to information. But I also think it's also created some issues where it's so much noise. Either they don't do anything, or 2, it's micro information and they don't get enough of the understanding and the principles or even the legal side of it, right? Sure. Like, like for us here in Alabama, I mean, we passed the 203. Well, man, I had a room of 80 people in here in January. I think it was January, February. Like 90% of the room were all trying to do wholesale. It was a class on wholesaling and had no clue that the 203 was passed last year, right? And so that's the side that I'm always like saying, they need to educate themselves. It's not like just run out and make $50,000. Like there's cause and effect to everything.
What's the 203? Just so for people know, I need to do a video on it.
The 203 was an act that got passed for wholesalers. It was just saying like there's certain parts of wholesaling now that are illegal. There's like 28 states that have made it a misdemeanor fine of $25,000. You can even go to jail for it. But Alabama didn't go as extreme about it. They just said, hey, look, there's some guidelines.
You just got to disclose. Basically.
Intent. If you're going to wholesale it, you got to sell it 3 days before you assign it. There's a lot of other things around it, but it only applies to 1 to 4 units. Anything over 4 units, you don't have to comply with the 203 because
it's residential.
It's just residential 1 to 4. It's all about intention. You have to be intentional about it. Yeah. So
Yeah, and disclose.
And
But I'm
disclose.
gonna do a video on that.
I did a class on it.
You did a class just on that
Just
bill?
yeah, it was a wholesaling class.
Right.
Yeah.
So I cut my teeth on wholesaling. It's
I did too.
disheartening for me to hear you say that you're not really teaching wholesaling a whole lot, because I think it's like anything. You're going back to being a transactional engineer. Does this deal make the most sense for me to wholesale it?
No, I'm with you.
And then I will.
And don't mistake what I said there. I teach it here. Even with my one-on-one clients, I'm teaching them all of it. But I'm saying our primary focus is not going to be wholesaling. Our primary focus is going to find rehabs and rentals. Now, as they come in, if we're like, hey, I just don't know if I want a rehab out there, then let's wholesale it. If it's a rental and we're like, it's just a little too old, I don't know if I want to take it, then let's wholesale it. I look at wholesaling just as an exit off of anything I don't want.
Like a B plan.
Like a B plan. That's exactly right. I don't want to take people just into wholesaling. I just don't. I'm like, there's 1,000 people on the internet that'll do that.
Somebody asked me one time, what was my biggest regret in real estate?
I know mine.
And I'll ask you yours in a second. You know what mine was?
What?
I wholesaled every great deal I ever got.
Yeah.
And I look back at 2012, 13, 14, 15 even, for about 4 years where I was doing we were probably the biggest wholesale company in the state of Alabama. We were doing so many deals. I look back at a lot of the deals we did, and these are houses worth, I'm getting them for 25 grand, 30 grand. Mm-hmm. Those houses are worth 250, 300 grand right now.
Yeah.
Those are houses I should have held.
Mm-hmm.
My biggest regret in real estate is not holding on to enough property.
Yeah. I'm with you. My biggest regret is that I learned wholesaling. I went straight into wholesaling. I built an entire team. We were doing national wholesaling. And I woke up one day and realized I had a coach say to me, he's like, why don't you do anything else? And I'm like, well, because I'm making money with this. He's like, well, what's the long-term strategy? I'm like, well, I want to own real estate. He's like, why aren't you owning it now? He's like, you're making everybody else wealthy. He's like, you're just a job. That's all you are, is a job.
So I want to, and I appreciate that story, and I want to ask you about that, because you're talking about, your program or anyone who's getting started, whether they're with you, me, or whomever, or just trying to do it on their own. At what point is it, because a lot of folks, like you said, the 80% or so that you mentioned, maybe they already have a job and they want real estate to now be their job, and it sounds cool.
Yeah.
But once that actually happens, what I found for my students is, oh, guess what? You just replaced your job you have a job now.
That's right.
So
you're working double the hours.
But you're doing it for yourself, though. You don't have to breathe it down your neck, right, unless it's Zack, unless Zack's your coach, if you're listening to him. So, and I know I heard you mention earlier that, let's build the active while we build the passive. One of our mutual friends that we have once told me, Mr. Jason Medley, told me one of the most brilliant things I've ever heard about real estate is you can't have cash flow until you have a cash cow. You can't go out there and start, because you mentioned it even, you're going to run out of money.
Yeah.
You've got to have something,
you gotta have liquidity,
that's bringing in money so that you can now invest that money into something that's going to pay you over and over and over. So how would you advise folks that maybe they already have a job, they got a W-2, they want to do real estate because real estate looks way more enticing. I'd rather have that job than the job I have now.
I tell them all the same, do not quit your job.
I'm talking about long term, in a 5 to 10 year kind of vision. I've got this job, I've got a great W-2, but I want to replace it with real estate one day. What do I do?
You got to follow the pyramid method.
Which is
you got to, primary focus at the top of the pyramid is cash flow assets to equal my current income. The bottom two are wholesaling and rehabbing. These are transactional based that feed into the top of the pyramid. And for some that could be a year, for some that could be 2, that could be 3, that could be 4, right? But you have to have these engines, right? These cash cows starting to spin off money, and it takes a little while. You got to build your pipeline, get it going. You got to be consistent with it. But what happens is now you start producing $100,000, $200,000 a year off of these cash cows. Well, now you got to do something with it. And so that allows you to feed into the passive. until you get it to the point. And I get people like that all the time, Brian. They're like, hey, I want to replace my income. Well, don't quit your job. Just don't quit your job. There's 2 rules that I always say. Number 1, have at least 1 year of your salary sitting in the bank. And number 2, have the cash flow that you need that equals your salary. You have those 2 things, okay, you're ready to go. Because here's what happens. Your momentum to buy more cash flow assets will decrease as soon as you leave that W-2.
Correct.
Right? So if we don't have it built up sufficiently enough for at least 2 years, when we leave our job, the banks are going to red flag us.
Zach, I hate my job.
I know.
I got to quit my job. I don't want my job anymore.
And so that's an emotional statement. So be logical about it and say, look, I hate my job, but it's an income stream. So I always answer with this when people say that, because they do. I hate my job. I'm like, okay, you're in the middle of a rehab and it's draining you and you hate it. You're going to walk away from it and get foreclosed on and never be able to use that lender again and lose the money that you put into it? Well, no, I'm going to ride it out until I get paid. Exactly. You got to ride that job. And you got to, until you reach the plateau, or we use a bell curve model, until you reach the top of that bell curve to where you now are in a position to leave that job. But that's a discipline. Like, a lot of people come into real estate emotionally. They come in because they see the money. Oh, I want the money, right? They see the YouTube Lamborghinis and all that, and they're like, oh, I want that. That's not real estate. That's flash and bang. Real estate is how much wealth can I build over a long period of time. It is the long run, and you have to be strategic about that on the front end. You have to. And it takes discipline, and it takes consistent, and it takes focus, massive amounts of focus. And I see it firsthand as a president of this club, is that, I see him coming in like, well, let's take Jack, the 26-year-old guy. The day I met him, I knew he would make it.
Oh, yeah.
I knew it.
Oh, you can tell. Can't you?
He came to every meeting. He sat in the front row. He came to every class. He came to everything. He was front row taking notes.
Because that's probably who you were.
It was.
That's 100% who I was.
100% who I was.
You can see it. You can see it from a mile away. And conversely, you can see it from a mile away who's not going to.
100, yeah, absolutely. Because, they don't take notes. They don't take serious. They show up every once in a while. It's just kind of like a fun.
They argue with you.
Oh.
Ask you question after question. I've already answered that question.
Or they're like, well, I watched this video on YouTube. I'm like, all right, I don't argue with them anymore. Yeah. I just say, it sounds like you found somebody to help you.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Cool, and more power to them. And, speaking of that, though, because you mentioned, YouTube, and it's not just YouTube. It's Google. It's AI now. It's everything. There's information it's everywhere. And there's not a whole lot you're saying or I'm saying.
It hasn't been said.
It hadn't been said.
Absolutely.
It's already out there. We're not reinventing wheels out here. It's tried and true. This is, of course. But how can we use ChatGPT, Google, YouTube? How can we use it to our advantage? In real estate?
I'm way behind the gun on AI.
Well, let's talk about YouTube then.
So
how can we use YouTube to our advantage?
So here's my clarity on that statement. Is I don't have a problem with YouTube University. I actually think it's been great because it has exposed more people to the idea of changing their financial destiny. And they see it and they're like, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. So I think that's great. Where I think the problem lies is that people get stuck on YouTube University and they listen to 9 different people. And let's just be clear here. 9 different people are going to tell you their way how they made $1 million.
And they did.
And it's not wrong. It's just that's how they did it. You can't go out and try to apply 9 different people's method and theology and think you're going to make it. You have to say, okay, these 9 people are all great and I love them all, but I got to pick one. And I got to go deep with that one person and get that going and say, okay, this is working. I'm making money. Now let me go back and try this other lady's strategy. You know what I mean? That's the side that I think our generation coming up hasn't quite figured out yet. When I came up, we were forced to do that. We didn't have YouTube University. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have these things, right? So it was like when we found someone, we just latched on to them and like, teach me everything you know. Right?
That's why I bought a mobile home park. because the guy that taught me initially was all about mobile home parks.
That's it, man.
And I'm like, it was on my radar from the very beginning.
That's it.
Because of that guy.
That's my point. And so it's not that it's wrong.
That's funny.
It's just you've got to learn how to say, okay, it's gotten me to the point that I'm awake. I've got the fire. I've got the drive. I see where I'm going, but now I got to go deeper.
You know, to that point, the biggest mistake I see people make when they get started in real estate is they don't stick to one strategy as well.
Long enough.
I really don't think, I think the transactional engineer thing is phenomenal for me and for you, yeah. And then for people who've been in it long enough. But I really, if I look back and I think about all the most successful people I know in real estate, it's like there's a guy in Birmingham who's been doing nothing but flips for 20 years.
Yeah, I know him.
And he created such massive amount of money that he could take that money because he had a cash cow and now start buying, you know, duplex rentals. He can start buying storage units and
grocery stores and turning them into stores.
Yeah, correct. But he did that because he focused on one thing for so long and got it dialed in. Yeah. You know, there's a lady in Birmingham who's a part of our mastermind group who does nothing but apartments.
Yeah.
And that's her thing. And she's got 600 and something units right now because she's only focused on apartments. Yeah. And just the folks that really dial in, this is going to be my thing. So I always, what's going to be your thing? What resonates with you that you can really dive deep in and go for it? And then once you kind of develop something there, now we can start to move on to something else.
And I couldn't agree more with that. When someone is on their own. When they're on their own, it's impossible for them to try to be a transactional engineer. When I'm direct working one-on-one with a client, I have no problem because I'm looking at every deal.
But you're almost in charge.
But I'm forcing them to hyper focus on learning rehabbing and buying rentals. Everything else, I say, look, you're going to learn it as you bring it to me, and then I help structure it with you. Here's the eyes I want you to look at this deal from. It's not trash. We need to go back and say this, and we need to offer this, and now let's structure it. And here's the paper. So they learn that through like almost like work in progress. You know what I mean? But
you're the backstop.
That's right. Absolutely. And that's my point to what you had said. Hey, I only push clients I work with one-on-one into that world because I'm there. Like I've done them. I've structured them. I know how to communicate them and make them work. Someone coming to the club that's not working with me direct one-on-one, no. I'm not like, hey, go out and learn 5 strategies. You know, I'm like, even at the beginner's class, I'm like, you need to pick one. You need to pick one and get real good at it. So I'm with you on that. 100% I'm with you on that.
What have I not brought up you want to talk about?
I don't know, man. I'm just talking.
I know, but you're great at that. I just want to make sure I've covered everything because I kind of covered everything I want to talk about. Yeah. I know. When are your meetings? They're the first Thursday.
Yes, we meet the first Thursday of every month in Huntsville, Alabama.
In Huntsville.
In Huntsville, yeah. We're just north of downtown. It's like 3 minutes from here. And so that, and then they could go to our meetup, mcreameetings.com.
McReia, MCREIA, meetings.com.
Yeah.
Is it right there?
No, it's not on there. But
what is it on there?
It's down here at the bottom. Or they can go to localinvestorclub.com.
There you go.
And then get a bunch of free stuff.
Guys, check out what Zach's been doing. You promoting your book anymore?
It's right here on this localinvestorclub.com.
Oh, because his book is the remind me of the name of it. It's been a couple of years.
Yeah, so the localinvestorclub.com has the free ebook on how to close your first deal, which is me breaking down the 4 pillars that I was talking about earlier.
Such a great resource if you're getting going because it really it helps you from the very beginning.
Yes.
It helps you kind of see what's what and gives you kind of like this higher level of perspective to see. I love that.
And really how each pillar has its own frameworks, and it's like, oh, so in pillar 1, there's these frameworks I need to learn. Oh, in pillar 2, there's these frameworks I need to learn. And so it really breaks it down into a way that it's not like, okay, I know I need to do that, but how? It's like, no, here's what you need to do, and here's the frameworks that you got to get good at.
Love it. Yep. Zack Childress, appreciate you joining me. I'll see you guys on the next one.